All right. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Abide Convos, episode 4 of the pod.
Episode 4.
Episode 4. We're doing this thing. And
Whole month.
just love how we've had different conversations and different topics. Actually, today we want to talk about a topic that's super important for our community. As Abide, you may have been in our sphere and heard us talking about ministering to the Lord, it being primary, not secondary. And we just want to have a convo about why that's so significant to our community, what that means for us, and even demystify. Like, what does it mean to minister to the Lord? Am I called to be that? What does it mean to be a priest? So we won't be able to fully dive into that. If you're interested in that, you should be joining ATD school and you should dive deep because that's really what we're going to be going into. But it is a super central conversation for us as the Abide family, what it means to minister to God, what it means to be a priest before Him. And I think it's a super significant conversation as a follower of Jesus, what that means, how Jesus invites us into that.
Yeah, I'll pose a question to you like this, because we had somebody write us in about a question, and just so you know, like if you have questions or you have ideas for the podcast, message us on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, comment somewhere, we'll find it. Maybe Reagan can do another one of those.
NGLs.
Yeah, one of those. Somebody asked, the phrasing was interesting, but like, what makes the worship at Abide special? And I think in some of this, I think we just be honest, some of the language made us a little uncomfortable. They're like, I've been to other churches, but Abide's worship is different. What makes it special? And I think your kids are knocking at the door.
Kids are knocking at the door.
Daddy. So, yeah, some of the language was a little bit uncomfortable, but they were asking what made Abide's worship different. They've been to other churches, but they're like, it's just different here. What makes it special? We don't want to ever exclude other churches.
No.
And we don't want to make it, but
we really don't feel like we're any better than anybody else.
No. And so I think in this conversation, just so everybody's clear, we don't want to say we do this, other churches don't do this. We just want to focus on this is what God's called us to do.
Yeah.
And kind of just leave it there.
And that's probably actually that person who wrote it is in a season of life that God is emphasizing ministry to the Lord, intimacy with Him, and they actually feel drawn
it's good.
to what God is doing here. So to say it doesn't make us any more elite or special, it's just God has given us a specific mandate to make space and room, to go low and slow, all of these things that you may not even understand, but I think are super important to just talk about. Like what makes Abide special. I think part of what makes our worship environment different is God has called us first and foremost to minister to Him and to focus our songs on Him, our worship, our adoration. A room full of people that are reaching for God. And again, this is at every church. I think every church is reaching for God. I think there is a prophetic thing that's going on a Sunday morning that makes it feel like, man, there's something happening in the room. But again, I think if you actually encapsulate what makes Abide special, it's a room full of people that are worshiping from a posture of Jesus, I'm here for you. And I'm in a space where intimacy is becoming first and foremost.
Yeah. And let's just camp out for 1 second, like on this subject, because the Lord's really doing something unique in Tampa. We just got out of a Pastors Connect today, where a bunch of pastors from all the different denomination streams come together. And I want to say that you said it, every church ministers to the Lord. We don't feel like we're better. Some churches, the expression is just different. And like, we do discipleship, but it's not the same as South Bay does discipleship, as Seaglass or as Overflow or worship. And so I like to think like, it's not that like, oh, we do the true worship. We do Abide worship.
That's right.
We just do our worship. And that's how we are. And it's like every person, you look at people on a spectrum, everybody loves Jesus, but we all kind of, it's expressed in different ways. And then when the Lord uses those people to then plant communities, the expression of relation to the Lord is then expressed in different ways. And that's purely all it is.
So good.
And so like, we got to like stop, because I do know this is a thing with some people of like, oh, well, you haven't really heard. We got to stop that of like, this is just how we do it. And I love like Tiffany and I last year around the Christmas time, we got to go spend Christmas Eve at a different church, and like I was very out of my element. It was actually a Catholic mass, which was kind of crazy.
Amen.
It was it was out of my element. But there were aspects of it where I could really feel the Lord's presence.
Yeah,
And
the Lord
please
is there.
don't come at me in the comments about our Catholic Christians and stuff. But I felt the Lord there. I carried the Lord at the very least. So I felt the Lord there as I approached him in worship. And it was really beautiful in some parts. So anyways, ministry unto the Lord. Yeah, it is really central. It really goes back to like the old campus,
Yeah.
like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. We don't talk about it as much anymore. I think the youth just got their name changed from Young Levites to youth. But we used to talk a lot, and we would use the word Levitical, Levite. He's calling us to be Levites. And not that we've abandoned it. I think the Lord brought us through that to implant a certain amount of DNA in us.
Yeah.
But what does that mean to you? Because I think this is a central part of the
It is
conversation.
super central. And just to circle back for,
Yeah.
I was thinking as you were talking, like
Yeah.
actually the Lord takes us through seasons to produce in us like a mandate and a calling, which I
So
think is
good.
so significant. Like we talk about finding your tribe, your community. And I think that actually it was something that God produced through a season of crushing, through a season of frustration, where
do it.
we found ourselves trying to do church and just kind of frustrated because it wasn't what the Lord was leading us to do, which led to us in 2019 feeling this invitation from God through Ezekiel 44, where it says, you know, the Lord called the sons of Zadok to come to his table to minister to him.
Come on.
And we just began to ask, what would that look like?
What is
for
that?
us as a yeah, what is that? Like
Yeah.
we just knew. And so we started on a Saturday night to come
Yeah.
together, just a few of us, to really love on Jesus. I mean, we make all this language complicated, but really it was a few of us in the room loving on Jesus in a real non-sexy way. Wasn't a full band. It wasn't, it was just like, man, we're just hungry for Jesus.
Many times in empty room.
And empty rooms. I mean, you're talking, it's so weak.
Weak love.
It was so weak, but the Lord did something there that
did.
honestly, man, even now we talk about like how do we get back to that, like expressing, you talked about it today, expressing on a post, expressing weak love, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
expressing weak love to Jesus and being satisfied in him.
So good.
And when we talk about Levites, just a recognition that even in the Old Testament, there was an invitation for a people to live. I mean, the priests lived closest to the tent. Yeah, there was like this proximity thing where they were called to tend to the altar, to minister to the Lord. And it was a way of life. So we just feel this fresh invitation even now. I mean, we
Yeah.
moved our prayer room over next gen. There's just this excitement around like, let's get back to tending to the altar of
Yeah.
Jesus and moving his heart and trusting that as we move his heart, he is faithful to release his hand and to touch people.
Yeah.
I think that was the great like deliverance for us. And like, we love people, but actually as we touch God, he touches his children. And he does such a better job at that than we could ever do.
Yeah. So many things my mind is going right now. One of the things I had to share this. When you were talking about Ezekiel 44, go back three and a half years when we were diving into that. I would imagine very few of us had we had very little theological understanding of what that really meant.
Oh, yeah.
But it's interesting, what I love about scripture, and we were with Samuel Whitfield the other day, and he was kind of hinting at some of this stuff, is that like scripture is literally alive. I just got this vision when you were talking. It's alive. And so you approach those verses, did not really understand what they really truly meant, but something living in them spoke to you.
Oh, yeah, drew me.
And then over 3.5 years, we've been still diving deeper and deeper into those verses.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like, you don't have to. So if you're out there and like I don't understand the Bible, don't worry. The Bible understands you.
Yeah,
The words are living.
It's drawing.
You allow the words just to read them, let them cut you, you're like, I don't really understand what this means, but it causes some sort of emotion. Sit there, don't go past. So I had to say that.
And also understand that not everybody, I mean, when God first spoke to us, Ezekiel 44,
Yeah.
I remember burning in my spirit, being excited, casting the vision, and then nobody really engaged.
Nobody, yeah.
I mean, I thought like, surely the whole church is gonna, like, yes. And it was like, man, it was 3 of us in a room. And Jesus confronted us with this question, like, am I enough for you?
So good.
That was the divine confrontation of 2019, where we would come into a room, and I remember being in the room, and we talk about it a lot, but it's just true. Like, just a few leaders and saying, like, should we just go home? Like, if it's just going to be us. And it was a season where, like, we just felt like God is watching us. Like, actually, God invited us. And if his invitation is only valid when people are in the room, then it's not a great invitation.
And I think that was the shift for us. We had for years, and I'm not talking about any other church, I'm talking about us. We had ministered unto people.
Yeah.
But the Lord was shifting it and saying, hey, you schedule this, what do we call them? Easy 44s, right? And we would show up on a Saturday or Thursday.
Saturday night, 6 p.m.
Saturday night. And sometimes nobody would be there.
Yeah.
But then it's like, you have to ask yourself, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Am I ministering to the people or am I ministering to the Lord? Paradigm shift for us. And so we would minister to him alone in a room. And I think we started getting a taste for like, what would of what actually loving the Lord really looks like. And because as a worship leader or as a preacher, I think we understand this chasing your tail feeling when you're ministering. You're trying to get a room to move.
Yeah.
And it's a terrible feeling.
It's tough.
But it's so easy to get the Lord to move.
Yeah.
I've noticed that as a worship leader specifically, when I'm leading, if I can focus on him, he comes really easily. Like that Thursday or Tuesday, I was leading that set down there.
Good.
Bro, I just felt him all over me. Yeah. But I've tried to lead rooms, and sometimes it works, and a lot of times it doesn't. And man, it was those early days I just found so much life. Like, oh, this is way easier.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And as a lifestyle, I think that's the invitation. When we talk about what does it mean to minister to the Lord, it's a life of an ongoing conversation with Jesus.
Yeah.
Not just on a Sunday morning or on a Wednesday night. That's a great starting place. But like living as a priest before the Lord, actually saying, my life is positioned for encounter with Jesus. And I am in an ongoing conversation where he's talking to me, I'm talking to him. I'm leading my family in that way. I'm leading my business in that way.
Yeah.
So part of like, man, if we could demystify ministry to God and priesthood, I would say it's simply living a life positioned to respond to God.
That's good.
Like a priestly people in the Old Testament, their life revolved around ministering in the tabernacle, right? So like we understand, like the veil's been opened up, we've been invited in, we're a New Testament people.
Yeah.
So we've got to ask, what does it look like now to live as priests? The Bible says in Revelation 1:5, right? We are a kingdom of kings and priests.
Yeah.
And that's what he's coming for. That's who we are. That's not what we're working up to be. That's who we are now.
Yeah.
So learning to engage with God and just kind of take off the pressure of like, we're not talking about some mystical moment where we're going behind a veil. It's like, no, we're talking about what God has given us access to. Like this holy, ongoing conversation. Like what you said, like anytime, I just want to say to you, anytime we turn our affection to him, he responds to us.
He does.
It's in my car, in my room. Like anytime I turn my affection to Jesus, and this is what's become so beautiful in the prayer room. Whether there's 3 people in a room or 50 people in a room, like, man, when I turn my affection to Jesus, he responds with mercy, grace, and loving kindness.
Wow.
We begin to pray the scriptures. He breathes on the scriptures. Tears begin to flow. I mean, there's vibrancy in life because we're not here in this room for an assignment.
Yeah.
We're not here to grow a church.
Yeah.
We're not here to further our calling. We're here because Jesus is there.
That's right.
And Jesus is enough. And he reveals his beauty. He reveals his nature. He reveals, I mean, it's the book we've all read, right? What's the book that we talk about? The Pursuit of Holy, right?
The Knowledge of the Holy.
The Knowledge of Holy. It's like
totally.
God actually begins to reveal himself to us.
Yeah.
And it strikes our heart. I mean, that's what happened in Easy 44. It's like God actually began to give us access to his nature. It's like, I don't ever want to leave that.
No.
So I just want to demystifying ministry to the Lord. It's not like a few anointed people in a room that are touching something that's not available. It's actually a corporate invitation to Exodus 19 where he's saying, come up. I want to commune with you. And it's actually our response to say, I'm going to give my life to that.
I feel this so much right now in the spirit in the church that the Lord is taking, like, I would never call somebody this, but I know there's people who sit at Abide or any church. They sit in the seat every Sunday. They would just call themselves normal Christians. Yeah. This like divine invitation to stop labeling, because when you do that, you're saying there's some things I just can't do. Yeah. I'm not supposed to do. And let me just say this: like if you call yourself a believer, if you're born again, you're born again into Christ.
Yeah.
And that means you are born through him into his life. It says you have died, so Christ lives his life through you. Well, Christ in the Old Testament, not to get all weird and spiritual, but like Christ is called, he's harkened back to this person named Melchizedek, who Melchizedek was a priestly king in the time of Abraham. And Christ in Psalms is called Melchizedek, this priest and king. And that's why in Revelation, he says, you are a kingdom of priests.
Yeah.
We are literally born into the mandate that Jesus had on the earth to minister unto God, to love on him. And I just want to break off any feeling of like, bro, I'm just normal little old me. Like the Lord loves you. I had used to say this when I was youth pastor a long time ago. That book, the 5 or 7 love languages, whatever, I think 5 love languages. God actually has a love language.
Yeah.
It's not words of affirmation. He already knows how amazing he is. It's not acts of service. You can't ever do anything. His love language is tied to what he wants, what he desires. And what he wants is you.
Yeah, quality
and it's
time.
quality time.
That's right.
His love language is quality time. Yeah. And so oftentimes I withhold myself from the Lord and don't fill up his love bucket. Remember that?
Love bucket. Praise the Lord.
I withhold myself because I don't think I'm worthy. Yeah. And the whole time the Lord's like, that's all I've ever wanted.
Yeah, so good.
And so you're like, well, what does this have to do with ministering to the Lord? Ministry unto the Lord is you just being available unto the Lord.
Yeah.
We need to do one of these one time about the secret place, because the Lord's been really speaking to me about like expanding my idea of the secret place.
Yeah.
I think it's more than just locking yourself in a closet with a Bible. I really feel like the secret place, I don't want to go into it, is like you carrying God throughout your day.
Yeah.
Like you becoming this altar, you becoming this tabernacle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you not only have the opportunity, but God has given you this, he is begging every day for you to not minister into him into like cleaning labels and bowls and stuff like that in the temple. Ministering to the Lord is just giving him what he wants, which is you.
So good.
Being connected.
Yeah, and just understanding. I was just thinking, what would I want to say to somebody who's in the conversation? I would say, you're not working to become something. You are something.
Oh, so
like
good.
You're not trying to become a priest. Like there's no book you can read to step into. Like actually, Peter would say to you, you're not like them. You're a chosen people, a holy nation, a royal priesthood.
Right.
So just even that acknowledgement now, I'm not trying to become, I am, is so powerful.
Yeah.
And saying, God, I'm not asking you what I need to do to become a priest. I'm trying to actually step into what I am.
Wow.
And a recognition and a breaking off of accusation that God, God doesn't see you in that way, or I don't relate to God in that way, but actually it is at the core of who you are. Like there is actually, you are wired. Like Tyler said, this new creation you became, and the core of that is actually priesthood.
Yeah.
It's actually a inward reach for God.
Yeah.
And a vibrant life of communion with him. I mean, the word priest has been categorized in so many things, but a vibrant life of communion with God, and understanding we're not working for connection, we actually start from it. That Jesus is actually the initiator of all of this stuff. So we're not trying to like position ourselves to get to a place, but actually he says he has seated us in heavenly places, and now we get to commune with him, which there's so many ways you can go there.
Oh yeah.
But I think in this episode, to encapsulate it, would say, you're not trying to become a priest, you are that.
Yeah.
It's actually who you are.
Yeah.
It's actually the way God has wired you.
Yeah.
So when you're washing your dishes, guess what? You're a priest.
Yep.
Like when you're with your kids and you're homeschooling them, guess what? You are a priest.
Yep.
And this actually becomes a function where, like Tyler said, at all moments I am inviting the Lord into my life, and that becomes my secret place.
Yeah.
It's a revelation.
I'll give you an example from because I know everybody's like, this sounds really good. My heart's burning. What do I do tomorrow?
Yeah.
Like for example, for me, let's use like a broken example of like when, let's say I've had a bad day and I've yelled at my kids, or I've just been rude to my wife or whatever. Because ministering to the Lord is in that context too, not just on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
For me, what I think ministering to the Lord looks like in creating relation with the Lord is when I'm feeling like crap about myself, instead of grabbing my phone, getting on Instagram, and then scrolling through reels to try to numb the pain, I actually would just sit and quiet myself and say, Lord, like, I am so sorry.
Yeah.
And like, I just need your grace right now. I need your help. Please forgive me and just help. Please make me like you. Like, reveal to me why I responded that way.
Yeah.
At least that may not be for everybody's response, but for me, that has been like ministry to the Lord
Yeah.
for me. It is because you're giving God what he wants, which is you.
Yeah.
You said something. We are now, this is a crazy thought. I heard somebody say this the other day. You are as holy now as you will ever be. Because you're seated with Christ, and who you really are is seated with Christ in heavenly places. And so if you died right now, you would immediately go to the heaven. And we know that sin separates us. So you are now as perfect as you will ever need to be with God. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
What we are doing now in this life is trying to renew our minds to get us to think from earth as it already is in heaven.
Yeah.
And so as we do that, we just say, Lord, can you just reveal to me who I really am?
Yeah.
Because I'm operating like I used to be, and that's not who I am
Yeah,
anymore.
that's good.
And you give God what he wants. He wants you.
Yeah.
And then you show up on a Sunday morning and it's worship, and that same connection you felt on a Tuesday night when you screwed the pooch, like, praise God. It's that same, it's the same God, the same intimate, because that those moments of like brokenness or just you're scared or you got bills and you don't know, and you're like, Lord, I'm just gonna choose to trust you. Like that same God shows up on a Sunday morning, and then it's like worship is different then.
Yeah.
And I would say that's when they watch Destiny, when they watch whoever, like, what's the difference? It's because there are moments where we quiet ourselves in brokenness and we say, Lord, I need you. And there's a dependency, there's a crutch. And then you show up in a room, and that intimate connection between you and God is put on display for people.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah.
And we're actually not wired, and maybe we just land here. You're
Yeah.
actually not wired to connect with God only on a Sunday morning.
That's so
Like,
good.
man, if me and Destiny, I said to her, like, hey, let's actually connect about life on Sunday morning. I mean, we love each other. We're committed. We are in covenant. But actually, we would enter into that Sunday morning time at a deficit, because what actually fuels us is the ongoing weekly, daily conversation with one
right.
another.
Yeah.
So for those of you that are like, I just actually struggle with connecting with God on a Sunday morning, I would say I need you to understand, if that's the only time you're actually trying to minister to God, you are actually starting at a deficit.
Yeah.
I mean, it is those times of stillness. I watched you coming out of your season of deconstruction, wash dishes and speak in tongues for hours. I mean, it was this responsiveness to God that actually we would come in on a Sunday, and it wouldn't be trying to climb my mountain of deficit, but it would
So
actually
good.
be, I'm actually coming in and thanking God for the ongoing conversation I've had all week. It's the overflow.
Yeah.
I just want to say that's available for you. Like, you do not have to live life coming into Sunday
So
at a
good.
constant deficit and saying, God, here I am, fill me. You could actually come into a Sunday morning full.
Yeah.
Because you've been fostering this ongoing conversation all week with God. And it's not like every single Wednesday morning, it's like, I'm getting blasted. It's just, I'm staying committed to the conversation.
Yeah.
My wife and I had a full day today. Guess what? At 2:15, she rolled up to the church. We drove down the road. We went to Dunkin', and we actually just drove down 60. And we were just together. It wasn't this, but you know what? It matters.
It does.
Because like we could have said, we'll just skip it, but no, she drove to the church.
good.
I hopped in the van, and we just had a conversation.
good.
Just this moment of connection with that, which actually gave me life. So I'm not rolling home tonight at 9:30 after prayer room, feeling like I haven't talked. No, like we made space to commune with one another and to be together. And so I just want to encourage you, man. This conversation of ministry to the Lord can probably have 26 episodes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I can see. Yeah.
There's
This is a well
so
here.
many ways we can
Yeah.
go. But to summarize, you're not working to be a priest, you are a priest.
So good.
And the way you fuel priesthood is through ongoing responsiveness to God. And I would say it as simple as this: keep the conversation going.
Yes. So good.
Don't wait for the conversation to be fueled by Pastor Tyler on a Sunday morning saying, talk to God. And not like, no, like, God, I'm going to talk to you about my day.
Yeah.
I'm going to shut, like you said, maybe you turn off the podcast or the radio and you say, God, I'm just going to give you these 10 minutes. I'm going to have a conversation with you. I'm going to allow you to speak to me.
Yeah.
And let's allow God to actually activate in us what we already are.
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, hopefully you guys find this encouraging, and just, we don't always do like a challenge, but I just feel this for this one is just take time this week in low moments and high moments and just very average moments, just to like make time for the Lord and talk to him.
Yeah.
You're like, I've never done that before. Just try it.
Just try it.
Just say stuff. It doesn't have to be, hey, Father, thou art in heaven. Like, just talk to him. Like, I don't know if I ever say that, but like, and that's the crazy thing, is so many of us grew up with bad experiences with earthly fathers or earthly authoritarian figures. God actually wants to talk to you.
Yeah, he does.
He's not mad at you. He really just wants to talk to you. So take some time this week and minister to the Lord through just your conversation with him.
Yeah, just turn your affections to him and watch him go. So
good.
thank you for joining us to
Yes.
episode 4.
Boom.
Share the podcast. I hope you're encouraged, and we look forward to more Abide Convos.
Peace.
Peace.